Hey everyone, I'm Melissa Erdelak, host of the Gluten-Free Recipe Challenge podcast and creator behind the gluten-free website, Mama Gourmand. Here we take beloved recipes you thought you'd never enjoy again and transform them into easy copycat versions just as good as the originals. Just a heads up, I can get quite passionate about gluten-free baking, which may come out in some colorful language. If this offends you, I might not be your cup of tea. If you're intrigued, but sensitive ears are around, put some headphones on, and let's do this. I know exactly how you feel because I'm right there with you. I will never consume a single grain of sugar again. I just want to hit a big, fat reset button and purge my body of all the gluttony. This week's episode is going to hit the money spot for you and me both. Let's all get this train back on the rails and in the form of almond flour tortillas. Why do I love this gem of a recipe? Well, I do enjoy myself a sandwich for lunch, and these wraps make the perfect lunch meat and cheese vessel. Also, they only require 4 ingredients: almond flour, which you can get in bulk at Costco, or I get smaller bags at Aldi, psyllium husk, which more on that later, baking powder, and eggs. And lastly, they're freezer friendly. They're great for meal prep. I store them between sheets of wax paper, wrap them up, and then freeze. They're easy to grab and defrost for weekday lunches. Okay, so what do you need to make these? Nothing fancy: a nonstick skillet, parchment paper, rolling pin, and if you want perfectly round circles, which I usually do not, I use a saucepan lid to press it into a perfect circle. For the ingredients, you'll need blanched almond flour, not almond meal. The psyllium husk is the key ingredient for making the tortillas soft and flexible, so you can wrap them around things. It helps absorb the liquid so the dough is soft and pliable. Baking powder is a texture thing. It adds a little lift and lightness. And then the eggs are for moisture and for binding the ingredients. To make it, first you prepare your dough by whisking together the almond flour, the psyllium, the baking powder, and I forgot to mention salt for flavor, in a mixing bowl. Make a well in the middle of that and then pour in eggs and then warm water. Warm water works better to activate the psyllium and bind everything together. Mix it together in the well first, and then I gradually work it in with the dry ingredients. Cover and let it rest for 10 minutes. This just gives time for the psyllium to do its thing, absorb the liquid, and bind the dough. Then to divide out the dough, I pat it into a thick round disc. I use a knife and cut the disc into 6 equal wedges, kind of like a Trivia Pursuit thing. And then take each wedge and shape them into smooth balls. So to roll it out, place a ball between 2 pieces of parchment paper and then just use a rolling pin to flatten it out into about a 6-inch diameter circle. The size of the circle is key because that's what gives you the ideal thickness. You don't want these too thick or they won't cook, and you don't want them too thin or they'll cook too fast and not be flexible. At this point, if you want perfectly round circles, you can take a 6-inch lid and put it on top of the parchment and then press down. And then when you lift off the parchment, you'll have lines to kind of cut away the excess dough. The good thing about making perfect circles, I take that excess dough and I set it aside. And then at the end, you'll have enough dough to make 2 more tortillas. So it's kind of like bonus tortillas. Now it's time to cook them. So you want to take a non-stick pan, or you could use a cast iron skillet. If your pan surface is truly non-stick, you do not need any oil for this. If it sticks a little bit, I would just put a little bit of oil. You could use like olive oil or avocado oil, anything you prefer. Drizzle in the pan and then just use a paper towel to wipe up any excess. So you have your tortilla, peel off one side, and then flip it over into the pan so the side without the parchment is face down on the pan, the side with the parchment is on top. And then as it heats, you just kind of peel the parchment away from it. Cook it for 30 seconds on one side, and you want to be sure not to overcook it so they stay soft. Then flip it over, cook it for 30 seconds on the other side, and transfer it to a wire rack to cool. So since these take such a quick time to cook, usually what I do is I roll out all my tortillas first, and I just stack them up with either strips of wax paper in between or strips of parchment. And then when I have them all rolled out, then I just quickly cook them. You could store them in the fridge for 3 to 4 days, or you could do like I do. I just store them in the freezer. And then when you're ready to enjoy them, briefly microwave the ones stored in the refrigerator for about 10 seconds, or you could rewarm them again in a dry, hot skillet. And for frozen ones, I microwave from frozen. I just microwave at 50% power for about 45 to 60 seconds. If you really want to board the almond flour train, I have a ton more recipes on the site. And I want you to be aware, you can't just substitute almond flour for wheat flour or gluten-free flour in recipes. It will be a disaster. But check out my almond flour recipes, and you could probably find everything you're looking for there. There's breads, there's muffins, there's cookies. I have pancakes, brownies. Let me know if there's something that you're looking for that you don't see there, and I will develop a recipe for that. And then just a little note before we wrap up, I'm going to be taking January off from the podcast and dive into some new areas for my website. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd love to hear from you, like what you don't like, what you find helpful, what you want to see more of, all the positive feedback on Apple Podcast or Spotify reviews, which is helpful for the show to grow. But, if you have some criticisms, we can just keep that between you and me, and you can go ahead and send me an email. For this full recipe or to contact me, go to the show notes page. To get to it, click on the link provided in whatever podcast app you're listening on, or you could go to my recipe website, which is mamagourmand.com, and click on the podcast tab, and there you'll find the full recipe along with any recommended ingredients or equipment I've mentioned.